So, you want to get better with Mantis? Well, you've come to the right place. Why should you listen to me though? Well, I reached Grandmaster as a solo queue strategist in only 10 hours and an 81% win rate. So back to Mantis, they are an incredibly strong strategist boasting the highest win rate in both ranked and quick match for Season 1, so an excellent pick all around. But why then? Well, because they boast a lethal mix of damage, healing and utility. So how can you maximise your effectiveness with this hero? Well, let's dive in and find out. So starting with the basics, her auto attack is a fast moving projectile, meaning if you want to land your shots you need to lead slightly ahead of where your target's going to be. The projectile itself deals 50 damage or 100 for a crit, which in itself is already crazy for a strategist. Plus you are incentivized to aim for crits since you gain a life orb for each you land, but we'll come on to that in a moment. To make things a little bit insane, the projectile has no damage fall off whatsoever, meaning you can deal max damage across the map if you wanted. For this reason, Mantis can comfortably sit in the backline peppering the enemy with damage. The only consideration to make here is how often you're going to be landing those crits, so I would recommend sitting it at around medium range. Now, before I go any further, I need to talk about life orbs. These are consumed whenever you use a basic ability. Fortunately, life orbs are generated passively at a rate of 1 every 3 seconds, or whenever you land a crit. For this reason, to maximise life orb generation, you should always be aiming for the head. Now, since you can only ever have a maximum of 4 life orbs, and technically you can generate 2.5 every second assuming you land all crits, you should always be using your abilities, which will naturally consume a life orb. Every time you do so, you will be activating your passive, Nature's Favour, which grants 12.5 healing per second for 8 seconds. The only drawback here is that consuming another life orb while the passive is active will only refresh its duration, it does not stack. So don't panic and try spamming abilities, it won't make a difference. But the good news here is you should always have your passive active, giving you much better survivability over some of the other strategists. Her first ability, Healing Flower, bound to right click by default, is the main method of healing allies. Upon casting, it will heal the target for 55 health, then 20 per second for 8 seconds, so don't go spamming this into an ally thinking you're doing lots of healing. In fact, you'll be losing a lot of value, since the heal over time simply refreshes, it does not stack. The better way to use this ability is to keep one active on all allies that are likely to be losing health. This is why it is so important that you land those crits, as it can be difficult to ensure everyone has an active heal, especially when we start considering your other basic abilities. Let's be honest, this is not the most powerful heal in the game, which is why you should pair Mantis with someone like Lunar Snow, who can output much faster healing. However, the good news is that once active, you don't need line of sight for the heal to continue, which is a pitfall of some of the other characters, so pairing a Mantis with a good Black Panther, Spider-Man or Psylocke can be an excellent choice. The second ability, Allied Inspiration, bound to E by default, provides the target ally with a 12% damage boost. This doesn't sound like much, and if I'm honest, it really isn't. There are so many other damage boosting abilities in the game that are way better, but most are on a much longer cooldown. The good thing about Mantis' damage boost is that you can keep it active on critical damage dealers for the vast majority of the game, which really adds up. So when should you be damage boosting versus healing? This is a question I get asked a lot. Well, the short answer is it depends on the situation. I know, cop-out answer, but let me explain. If your team are being bursted down, then the healing won't actually find much value at all, so I would consider prioritizing damage boosts in these situations. This is more common in higher ranks where target prioritization becomes much better, or if you are against a dive-heavy comp. While if your team are taking chip damage over time from a pokey team, I would consider prioritizing healing. Then you can mix the alternative abilities if you find you have some spare life orbs. Next up, we have Natural Anger, bound to F by default, which is basically the same as your E ability, but it's self-casts, providing Mantis herself with a 12% damage boost for 8 seconds. All the same logic I applied to the E ability also applies here. One consideration I would like to make though is that you should always be applying your F ability if you are either by yourself or at max life orbs. Why? Because doing so activates your passive self-heal at the very minimum, increasing your survivability, which can prove critical as Mantis doesn't quite have the same escape capabilities as other strategists. Plus, you're getting that slight damage boost. The last basic ability is Spore Slumber, bound to Shift by default. This ability fires a slow moving projectile with a significant bullet drop. Because of the bullet drop, you need to be careful where you aim, especially if you are trying to hit a target at distance, which I wouldn't recommend. You will need to aim much higher than the intended target. Now, there are a few unique interactions with this ability that very few people are actually aware of. Firstly, after being slept, there is a 0.5 second window where any damage done to the target won't wake them up. So if you're fast, you can get 2 auto attacks off as Mantis, which is 200 damage if they're headshots. The other thing is that an illusion of Mantis appears behind the target once they're affected. If allies of that target do 100 damage to this illusion, it will break the sleep. So for this reason, sleeping isn't very effective during teamfights, as the illusion may be randomly hit by an AoE, for example. The best way to use this ability is for escaping. Since this is really your only survivability tool, try to keep it off cooldown for when a hero tries to dive you, or use it to catch a hero out of position. Just remember to keep good lines of communication with your DPS, as they can help follow up. Your ultimate then, Soul Resurgence bound to Q by default, generates a healing field around you in a 15 meter radius, doing 150 healing per second. This is significantly less than the 250 healing per second of Luna's ult, and it only lasts for 8 seconds instead of Luna's 12, so why is it even in the game? Well, there are a few more positives. Firstly, upon casting it instantly heals for 200 health, meaning you can pop it in a pinch to get allies back to health. And if allies are full health at any point, 70% of any healing done converts into overhealth to a maximum of 100, which reduces the threat of certain DPS ultimates. For this reason, you should consider using this when your team are either getting low or to counter certain ults. Oh, and it requires only 3,700 energy, whereas Luna's is 4,000, meaning you'll get it a fraction faster. Let's talk about team-ups for Season 1, since that is when this video is being released. If you're watching this after April the 11th, 2025, refer to the Marvel Rivals wiki after this video, of course. In Season 1, Mantis has one team-up with Adam Warlock. Doing so will provide Adam with a 15% healing boost, while Mantis gets access to his self-res ability on a 120 second cooldown. The same team-up applies to Star-Lord, although he isn't as strong in Season 1 as some of the other DPS characters, so I wouldn't recommend taking all 3. This team up is excellent though, and the res offers Mantis so much utility. However, there are some drawbacks. Both Mantis and Adam have excellent overall utility and damage, but are somewhat lacking when it comes to raw healing output. Luna, Cloak, Rocket, and now Invisible Woman are much better. So you need to draft a team with better survivability if you want to run these two. Strange and Magneto are excellent tanks to pair here. One tip I'd like to mention about the self-res is that it can be cancelled. Don't feel like you have to res in a bad position, or if you're being cheeky, try luring the enemy team away from the fight with your ghost and then cancel the res. You won't lose any momentum as the spawn timer is already active and you have saved your team some time. Plus, you don't consume the cooldown. Just bear in mind this typically only fools people in lower ranks. Okay, so outside of team-ups, what other notable heroes synergize with Mantis? Well, when it comes to tanks, you have 2 options. Number 1, go for dive tanks, since you can rely on your healing to keep them topped up out of LOS, and grant them a damage boost to get the picks they need and then get the hell out of there. Or number 2, go for tanks with access to shields or ways to stop damage, since you can't provide the burst healing. Strange and Magneto, as I mentioned earlier, fall into this category and are excellent picks. The remaining tanks like Groot and Penny may struggle to stay alive if you don't have someone like Luna on your team. When it comes to DPS, the same logic applies. Dive heroes like Spider-Man synergize very well. Just remember, if you do decide to go down this route, always make sure to damage boost and heal your diving allies to maximize their chance of getting a pick. Okay, so counters then. I mentioned before that Mantis really struggles when it comes to survivability and escape. Her only real option is Spore Slumber, which is on a very long cooldown, so dive heroes like Spider-Man and Venom can be a serious issue. Also, since they only have a base 275 health, you need to be careful of people like Hawkeye, who can very quickly obliterate your health bar, so where possible, try to strafe in an unpredictable pattern without jumping. This leads me nicely onto my next point, positioning. Where should you be positioning yourself as Mantis? I've already mentioned that you want to be aiming for headshots, since you want to maximise life orb generation, so medium range is probably the best place to be. Aside from this, you should always be putting yourself in a defensible position. By that, I simply mean somewhere you can either escape or get help from an ally. So behind your tank, on high ground, or around a corner, since you don't actually need line of sight for those 8 seconds that your heal is active. This does mean you can take off angles to get some cheeky damage, but just bear in mind the composition of the enemy team. If there's a chance you will get dived, be careful and try to keep your sleep off cooldown. So to conclude then, Mantis has great overall damage and utility, assuming you're able to hit those headshots. Their healing is okay, but excels at keeping heroes out of LOS topped up, so try pairing them with dive heavy comps. Where possible, you should always be using your life orbs, even if that's just to boost your own damage. But remember, they have very poor survivability, so be very wary of your positioning and try to keep your Spore Slumber off cooldown to give you a chance of survivability. If you watched the video all the way to the end, thank you. Let me know who you are by leaving a comment, and if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing. I upload Marvel Rivals content regularly.